Hello and welcome to another episode of Despite the Challenges, a show where we showcase the abilities of people who, despite their impeding circumstances and challenges, not only turn their own lives around, but they go out in the community doing amazing things. Today we will be taking a little bit diversion from our standard theme. We are going to be recording a segment of interviews, which was an initiative made by Robert Wood Johnson Hospital in New Brunswick with a grant from A1 Foundation to help the Latino community overcome domestic violence challenges. And my guests today here are, in this segment, are the Director of Community Health Promotions, Mariam Merced, and Elaine Hewins. She's the Program Coordinator from Domestic Violence Education and Awareness, Community Health Promotion, both from Robert Wood Johnson University Hospital. Elaine and Mariam, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and how this whole initiative was put together.
Okay.
So we wanna first thank you for inviting us to the show. This is a very important part of what we're doing. We want to promote the information through our media. So this is a very important piece to the work that we're doing in the Latino community. So we started this work 13 years ago as a response to an incidence of domestic violence in our community. The hospital was involved in doing some work with victims that are survivors that had significant scarring from domestic violence incidents. Mm-hmm. And then we had a situation where a volunteer that came to work with us on a Wednesday was murdered by her husband on the same week. And she had been a volunteer to one of our community health fairs. And, you know, this touched us in many ways. And we decided to take a collective approach of action, of doing something about it, because if not, we will be patching up women and not looking at the real problem, which was domestic violence in our community.
Which domestic violence, and most often it is unreported and goes unsaid. Right, and as working with the hospital, especially in the community education and awareness outreach programs, and I'm sure you have countless stories that you have witnessed, people coming in with injuries, etc. So tell us a little bit more about how this initiative came about, the No Mass initiative came about.
Okay, and you know, as you said, there are so many incidents of domestic violence, and as Mariam was speaking about Orquídea, when she was murdered, that really created a point in the community where leaders said, we must focus on prevention. Mm-hmm. So Mariam was one of the leaders in starting the whole coalition, and over many years we led a variety of initiatives.
Were they just focus
to
a specific population, or in general?
We mainly have work in the city of New Brunswick, and New Brunswick has a 50% Latino community. Yes. So many of our initiatives have targeted the situation of that particular community. Mm-hmm. And at the beginning, we did a lot of education and awareness. As we moved on, we heard from the women what they needed. So the work that we have done have been informed all along by the needs of the community. So we have done initiatives of healthy relationships, mm-hmm. of 100 Men Against Domestic Violence, because we wanted to talk to the young men about DV. So all the initiatives, all the steps that we have taken has taken us to the No Mass initiative that we are working now, which is mm-hmm. a culmination of a lot of that work.
So in your experiences or what you see, is the rates of domestic violence reports are much higher with immigrant communities, or are there additional barriers and layers that challenges them?
We know that for both domestic violence and sexual violence, and the No Mas initiative focuses on both domestic and sexual violence, So we know that these crimes are extremely underreported across all communities. But perhaps for immigrant communities, there are additional barriers to reporting it, so that's even more of an issue. So with the No Mas initiative, we're looking to address domestic and sexual violence in the Latino community in terms of educating, prevention, and also responding to it or intervention if it has happened.
Okay.
And so we're looking to accomplish this through a three-tiered campaign. And with Tier 1, we're conducting face-to-face workshops with Latinas in the community and providing information in a supportive setting where meeting the community where they are so that they can feel comfortable. We're going out to churches and community centers. We're presenting the information in either Spanish or English, and really trying to get information out about that regardless of somebody's immigration status, they have the right to contact the police, to report violence and abuse, to go to court for help. And we're providing information about the system to kind of demystify it, but also looking at the Latino culture.
I was going to ask that. I know that it seems that because people speak the same language, culturally they are the same, which I think there are 26 Spanish-speaking countries out there, and I'm sure the cultures vary so much, even though they speak the same languages. How do you find that in your local community when you're reaching out, that not only that you have these issues to educate them, to have them come out of the mindset, but at the top that you see the differences in their mindset culturally? It must be a very difficult challenge.
I think that actually language is one of those things that unite us. They might be a different word or term, or we call a fruit a different way in a different country, but definitely Spanish is something that unites us as a community. There are some differences, more regional than anything else. You know, you take Caribbeans, we tend to be fast, we talk fast. People from Central America, South America tend to, you know, have a different pace of life, of talking. But we are looking more at those cultural traditions that might affect in different ways, issues of domestic violence, this whole thing about we are, you know, the women are there to keep the family together, so it makes it very difficult for her to make that decision to move away from an unhealthy relationship. We have issues of corruption of police in our country. So many times it's hard for them to call the police because they are thinking in the way that they were thinking that when they're back in their countries. We have a number of those cultural values that might prevent women reaching out for help. But on the other side, we are also touching on our strengths as community. And one of those is women helping women.
Oh, wow.
And
that's a very good way to bring them together,
and
to
that's
open
the
up.
way that we feel that, you know, if we help each other when you're having a baby or I'm having my baby, I can bring you food, I can help you with the other kids. But why can't we do that in a domestic violence situation?
Yes. Let's talk about that a little bit. Because in Latino community, the family is sacred, the community is sacred, and when the violence happens at home, like many cultures across the world, it's a personal issue. And no one wants to intervene because it's between the wife and husband and the family. So when you are facing these challenges within a community or a family, and they are new to the culture in America, which in 21st century we have a lot more rights available to women all over the world in their home countries as well, they may not be aware of.
That's right.
Oh, there's no enforcement.
Yeah.
Yes.
So during the workshops, we emphasize that it's important for women who have immigrated here, people who have immigrated here, to understand their rights. And you know, this initiative targets Latina women, but we certainly acknowledge that, of course, abuse can happen to men as well. And so there's help available for men and women, regardless of background or sexual orientation. There's the laws and the protections are there. With the No Mas campaign, we are focusing on domestic and sexual violence against Latinas, since we know that the bulk of victims are women. But we always try to get that message out there that this can affect men as well. And it affects about 1/3 of women in the U.S. at some point in their lives. So it's extremely prevalent.
It is. It definitely is. It's regardless of your culture. It's a
Yes.
global issue, right? And we are really concerned about our local communities and our network and what we see and observe, right? So let's talk about some of the strengths in Latino community. As you mentioned, women helping women, language binding them together. What other factors that you would like our viewers to know that how, despite the challenges, this community comes together?
So I think that one of the strategies that we've been using is that we have been working with our community-based organizations that work with our women at their daycare center, their church. So we're going through organizations that they feel comfortable with.
I see.
We have something called personalismo, which is that thing that we relate to people, not to institutions.
I see.
So we are looking with what are our community leaders, what are our natural leaders in the community, working through them to do the hands-on education with our women in the community. And I think that's, using our strengths, which is, helping each other, also who the one-on-one kind of relationship has worked very well, and we have gotten very good feedback from the women and from the organizations.
So at the most of the time when people migrate, language and a cultural assimilation is an issue. They may be able to communicate to a certain extent, but not be fluent. And that does create a lot of challenges for them to understand their host culture, especially the local Latino community that you're working with this program. How do you see them, given their strength in their numbers, they're trying to overcome the issues of not only the assimilation, but also fighting our challenges such as domestic violence, sexual violence?
Well, I mean, one way that is really a strength is that when Latinos or any immigrant, but we see particularly in the Latino community immigrating to the U.S., they may leave behind a lot of their family members. So they're creating new families here, extended families, neighbors helping each other. And so we see in the community all the time women helping women. And we know that Latinos really emphasize hard work and honesty, and so there's so many strengths there. And among women in particular, we see if somebody has a baby or there's a Sweet 15, also known as a quinceañera, that the women are helping each other. Somebody's sick, they're caring for children. If they're going to a program in the evening, you'll see many ladies going together with all their kids and cooperating. So part of what we seek to do with the No Mas program is plant a seed or create a shift, and talking about, so you help each other with all of these things. But if a friend or a neighbor is experiencing domestic violence, what is the cultural message, or what are the kind of things you hear? And so sometimes they'll respond, oh, that's between a husband and a wife, you stay out of the business, or she must have done something to deserve that.
Yes.
So by talking in the workshops about how isolation is such a huge part of abuse, and that if we, her peers, other Latinas, turn away, and it's between them, and he's already isolating her, it really leaves her in a vulnerable position. And here, on the one hand, this wonderful strength of women helping women, then why would we turn away when she needs us the most? So we understand that in a 90-minute workshop, we're not going to erase so many things that have been ingrained through a lifetime.
Or generations.
Yeah. But if we can plant a seed and create that shift, that's a more meaningful takeaway.
Or give them some platform.
Yes.
For my audiences, I would like to go over a little bit about the initiative, No Mas Initiatives, and I would like either you, Elaine, or Mariam, just to give a little bit more detail about the program. So what the objectives are, the No Mas Initiative is an empowering educational and awareness campaign to address Latinos' fear about consequences of reporting, domestic violence and sexual assault. I think this is key that we need to, in our education and awareness approaches, take the fear away. Fear is a huge part of that keeps people holding back.
Yeah.
And the consequences are enormous. Tell us a little bit more about the whole project, that how it came about, and what A1 Foundation grant made it possible.
So like I said before, this concept that we're working in is a culmination of things that we have done over the years. The coalition's logo is, domestic violence has no place in our community. La violencia doméstica no tiene lugar en nuestra comunidad.
Yes, so we have that. If I can have our camera focus on this a little bit. This is the Robert Wood Johnson University Hospital in New Brunswick initiative, and the New Brunswick Domestic Violence Awareness Coalition is the coalition that you're talking
that
about.
We're talking about, yes.
And the No Mask program is
the new initiative through the A1
Foundation. Okay.
So what I was trying to explain is that as we have worked not only with the women, we have worked with our organizations, with our church organizations, with our schools, to bring awareness, information, for them to have tools or skills to how to better work with our women that are experiencing domestic violence. Our experience was at the beginning that a woman will go with a black eye from the daycare to the church to pick up the other kids in the school, and nobody would ask her what was wrong, what happened. Because people didn't know what to say, because people felt that was a problem with her and the husband. So now we have more people that have been trained, we have more people that have received information, workshop, we have brochures, we have a local DV agency that we are referring people to. So we have created a campaign to bring this information throughout the city, not only to the women, and the women are very important, and they will relay this information to their kid. And like you were saying about, generations in this country, we have worked with the kids in an initiative called 100 Men Against Domestic Violence and Healthy Relationship, because many of them were like, we don't know how to create a healthy relationship. We always live with our parents, with our grandparents, with unhealthy relationship. So we have done a number of initiatives to where we are now. So this is part of that long process, that long shift. Because I remember at the beginning when we started the program, the men will tell us, it's one thing here, but it's another thing across the border.
Yes, and I think you make a very good point there that, culturally they're kind of attuned to that. And for the first generation immigrants in the United States, they may feel a whole lot of cultural influence, and it's hard to walk away from that. But this isn't a global issue, right? If we look at culturally, this is accepted in one part of the world, but here in the United States itself, it's a behavior issue. It's beyond the cultural mindset. Yes, I would say that within some cultures, a lot of Asian cultures, male-dominated cultures, where men have more power over women. And sometimes that power is mistranslated into abuse. Right. So I'm sure that in your hospital settings that you come across many examples. Each story has its own substance to it.
Absolutely.
And the cultural part is another layer which complicates it.
Sometimes cultures have protective features, and sometimes if they emphasize male domination, it's a greater risk factor. One thing that's interesting in some of the research about Latino immigrants and domestic violence is that they report higher rates once they've been in the U.S., second, third generation, versus the home country. So it's this interesting phenomenon that surprises some people.
I think you make a very good point here that in past 8-10 years there is more conversation about domestic violence cases than there was. I do not know because of the social media or people just, I had enough of it, or the opening up to it. There's more reception to see that this does happen. Let's do something about it. Or it could be a combination of all of
I think that you take a Latino family and sometimes you have 3 generations living under one roof. You have grandma or the aunts, and then you have mom, and then you have kids going to college. And sometimes you are learning in college different things that you're learning at home, and you're going to bring those new ideas at home, and still your mom wants to act for you to act traditional, get married, all of this. And then the girls, the boys, they're bringing other influences from the, general culture. And you find sometimes that there are some clashes between them. But, sometimes we see the young professional Latinas that are, moving forward with their career. But when they go home, they still got to do dishes, and they got to do, their traditional things. And sometimes, those, we want to have young women, because we've done this workshop also at Rutgers, that can articulate to their parents their needs and how society is and what domestic violence is and how can it affect, the family.
So and what their rights are.
And what their rights are.
Let's talk about the family. So if there are 3 generations living in a same household, and the younger generation going to colleges, schools, and being aware of this is not the right way. So how do they take it back home? Or they try to make a change among themselves, or not just repeat the cycle? How do you see that?
It's a long process. It doesn't happen overnight. I think, I'm a product of that, of a very traditional mom, even though she has a master's in social work. When it came to the house, you tend to be a very traditional mom, and you take care of your husband, and you cook, and you clean, and you do all of that. And it was a process for me to establish a relationship with her where things are going to be different in my relationship than it was with your relationship. But it took us years to come to agreements.
Yes, and it's just, so amazing to see. It doesn't matter which culture you belong to and where you live. It's a generational gap also. And I could see that there were areas that I had differences with the opinions of my parents, and they had with their parents.
Yes.
But we love each other.
Yes,
that's
right?
the tradition.
We have,
as long as we do it with respect.
yes. So we have good intention in our heart, but our circumstances change. What's key is we're living in 21st century. We have so many advantages at our fingertips. We have social media. We have so many tools that we can access to find help. You mentioned that through this program, the fear was the number one. What do you see with all that's available? Fear keeps them holding back.
Well, I would say, the fears are for undocumented victims, there's a fear of deportation.
I see.
Then there are many members of the Latino community that, the immigration status is not an issue. For some it is, and there's that fear of deportation. Another general fear could be increased violence to themselves or their family if they report the abuse.
Okay.
And then in terms of their role as if it's a wife and a mother, that they want the abuse to stop. They don't necessarily want the abuser to go to jail or for him to be deported. So what we're trying to do with the No Mas initiative is demystify what are the rights, what are the laws, and to really push the message out there that regardless of a person's immigration status, they have the right to report domestic or sexual violence to the police or to family court and ask for a restraining order. And they're not going to be asked their status when they go in to make a report. So we're trying to get this information out there because knowledge is power, and give women information and options. One of the premises of the program, or of any good domestic violence work or sexual violence prevention work, is that we do not tell adult victims or survivors what to do, that they are autonomous adults, and we present people with information and options, And so going back to those fears, they have those fears of could be deportation or greater violence or being separated from the children. They don't know, if there's domestic violence and it's reported, will I be separated from my children?
I see.
So we're able to demystify some of that, explain the rights, and do it in a context where we're discussing Latina cultural values. We present it in either Spanish or English and provide a warm, supportive environment and validate women's experience, because we see that Latinas are very resilient. They're doing an amazing number of things for themselves, their families, their communities, often with very little.
That's really amazing. A question that I would like to ask is that the challenges the community already has when it comes to the barriers of languages or cultural mindset. The younger generation goes back to getting education and back to their community, giving back. How is the mindset changing for male domination, or this was the accepted way of our fathers and grandfathers and we just continue that? Is there a difference you see people living in the US and just shifting somewhere in their mindset of that's how my grandfather lived or my father lived and it's okay for me to do too?
Yeah, I think that as we come to the U.S. and we are acculturate, and we see things done in a different way than what we're used to, people start, imitating some of those costumes. Some are good, some are bad.
Yes.
But I think the children also influence many times because of the language barriers. The kids are the one who understand the system, can communicate with teachers, with, people at the hospital. So, you get that influence about what the kids are seeing. And I think that starts making a shift. And sometimes you go into a family and it's like you're living in Puerto Rico in your house, and then you're living in South Brunswick
in your house. Yes.
When you move out of your house, and that's the life of many of our young kids in the community. But I think that there is it's a shift, an intended shift with information and education. What we have done every year, we do a domestic violence awareness march where we march through the streets of New Brunswick, and we have chants and we have information, and people are looking at us through the windows and down in their balcony.
We will give them this information and all the information to find more about the page as well as the tags. So we will be giving this all this information. So I really thank you for sharing this information with our community, and we'll continue with the other segments of the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's our pleasure.
So this was another episode of Despite the Challenges, and I am host Ritu Chopra. Until next time.